Good evening, everyone. Before beginning, let me just thank Gulru for this introduction, and also to David to inviting me here, to giving me this great opportunity to present my work to you, but also to expand my research with the Harvard resources and to meet all the great colleagues. So let's begin. This is just a map to show you, if somebody doesn't know, the region we are focusing on. This is the map where you can see the let me see, the frontiers of the Bosnia Pashadom or Bosnia Eyalet at the end of the 16th, beginning of the 17th century. The territory of Bosnian Pashadom was gradually integrated into the Ottoman Empire over the period of 200 years. This process started since the first confrontation with the Ottoman forces near Bileća in 1388, 1 year before the Battle of Kosovo, through 1463, the year of the fall of the Bosnian kingdom, when the settlement of Vrh Bosna had also been transformed into the Ottoman Sarajevo, until the fall of Jajce in 1528 and Bihać in 1592. The process of Islamization and integration of Bosnian cultural traditions within the Ottoman norms lasted for at least the same amount of time. The socio-economic situation in Herzegovina during the Ottoman rule in 16th century was considerably changed in comparison to the earlier medieval period. General economic growth in the province was preceded by urbanization, which was absent before the arrival of the Ottomans. The plan of urbanization was carried out through the second half of the 15th century and over the 16th century. The central government in Istanbul deliberately started the foundation of new cities that became political, economic, and cultural centers of the new local authority and were populated with newly arrived settlers. Central government also stimulated the construction of and maintenance of roads, bridges, and Caravanserais, and all the infrastructure that enabled the development of trade. The medieval road network in Bosnian Pashadom was locally developed, while inadequate roads were connecting nearby towns and villages with few longer roads, like Dubrovački Drum. You cannot see it now, but because this is a map of the Roman roads. At that period, the road from Dubrovnik went down to the Via Egnatia, connected with the Via Egnatia, old Roman road to Istanbul, and Mostarska Džada, which connected Mostar with sea. The Ottoman improved the conditions of these roads and extended their network. The main Ottoman road in Balkans followed the route of the old Roman road connecting Belgrade to Istanbul, and after the establishment of Buda Pashadom was built to connect Buda as well. The road leading from Bosnia and Sarajevo connected to this main road, enabling the integration of Bosnia and Njalet with the Ottoman Empire. That would be from Sarajevo, connecting with the new Dubrovnik road and through Niš to Istanbul. The traffic was substantially increased after Bosnia entered the Ottoman Empire. Traveling in Bosnia during that time was much more frequent than in medieval times. Immediately after the Ottoman conquest of Bosnia in 1463, Sultan Mehmed II opened up a direct link to Florence that ran through Dubrovnik. By expanding the trade to this Italian town, the road connecting Dubrovnik through Foča, Novi Pazar, and Jedren to Istanbul and Bursa through Gallipolje gained more importance. This famous Dubrovnik road played an important role in the development of some of the settlements in Herzegovina and their economy. For example, the small settlement of Pljevlja on the Dubrovnik road, after the arrival of Ottomans, grew and became Kasaba, and subsequently in 1576 was made administrative center of Herzegovina Sanjak. The route running through Herzegovina Sanjak ran as follows: Dubrovnik, Trebinje, Bileća, Gacko, Čemerno, Tjenište, Foča, Čajniče, Pljevlja, Prijepolje, Sjenica, to Novi Pazar, Kopaonik, and further toward the Niš. One may say that the physiognomy of the territory of Bosnian Pashadom changed overnight, as the process of urbanization has created new oriental towns. From the second half of the 15th century to the end of the 16th century, 22 new towns were formed in Bosnia. And for example, every town that I said here, every settlement that I mentioned here had a Han or Caravanserais. Vakufs were pillar of foundation of new towns or the transformation of the old ones. Buildings designed to offer lodging to travelers, mostly merchants with their goods, were almost essential part of vakufs. For example, in 1555, Sanjak Bey of Bosnia, Mustafa Bey Sokolović, uncle of Mehmed Pasha Sokolović, had built within its vakuf, on an empty meadow, a mosque, a mektab, a caravanserai, a bridge over the river Lim, a hammam, a mill, and lots of shops. All this on empty meadow. This vakuf grew to become Kasaba Rudo, an important node in the trade routes of this area. It was in this area. Beside Hans and Caravanserais in Bosnian Pashadom, the Ottomans introduced through vakufs also other charitable institutions, where travelers would sleep and feed for free, like Musafirhane and Imaret. The founding documents would determine how long the traveler could stay, usually 3 days, and what would be offered for meal. Musafirhanas existed also within the Franciscan monasteries, like the ones in Makarska, Kreševo, Sutjeska, Olovo, and Fojnica, where Franciscans themselves asked the Emin of Sarajevo to allow them to establish Musafirhana. Evliya Čelebi mentions 5 Musafirhanas and 2 imarets while traveling through the Pashadom, which represents just a small number compared to their total amount. The 2 words, Han and Caravanserai, in the local language are synonyms. To denote this type of building historically, the local language used exclusively the word Han, while only recently word Caravanserai began to appear. Some researchers believe that the difference between them lies in the fact that the traveler paid for lodging and heating in a Han, while in Caravanserai, the lodging was free and the traveler had to take care of his own food and heating. However, in the founding documents, these terms are arbitrarily used, and they do not distinguish them in any way. In Karađorđe's endowment from 1570, which allowed to build 3 caravanserais in Potoci, Čičevo, and Konjic, yet another term is mentioned, ribac, singular is ribat, an Arabic word that originally meant border station with a military patrol. However, this is the only foundation document that mentions this specific word. Depending on their functions, Hans could be divided in those situated along the trade routes that were used by travelers for short-term breaks, and those for commercial purpose situated in larger commercial centers where merchants would stay for longer period of time, buying and selling their goods. Besides the function, Han can be distinguished depending on the targeted social status of travelers which they accommodated. As a matter of fact, there were Hans for noblemen, for middle class or peasants. According to the complexity of the ground plan, one can distinguish 2 basic types of Hans in Bosnian and Jalet. One that develops around the central courtyard and one without the courtyard. On the territory of Bosnian Pashadom, the predominant architectural type of Han was the one that had a simple ground plan, without the courtyard, and that probably developed from the local type of private house. According to Hamdija Kreševljaković, a researcher who gathered an extraordinary amount of valuable data for Bosnia and Herzegovina, and whose studies served as a basis for this work, the predominant type of Han building in Bosnia had the shape of a big barn. According to him, Hans were ground buildings, rectangular in plan, with walls between 2 and 2.5 meters in height, made of wood, stone, or adobe, with a hipped roof clad with shingles, and the entrance door high enough so that a horse could pass underneath it. The main characteristic of this kind of han is that the traveler and his horse were sharing the same space, sleeping space. This type of hans persisted even until the 18th and 19th century. Over time, more elaborate variations of this kind of han appeared. At first, one can see the detachment of living spaces for humans from the ones dedicated to the animals by adding another floor. Afterwards, hans grow in size, so the number of rooms multiplied. As a result, on the ground floor there was a stable for horses, a warehouse, and usually a coffee house, while on the upper floor the sleeping rooms were grouped around the central corridor. A good example of this type of building, although at a larger scale, can be found in the han in the city of Foča along the Dubrovnik road, endowed by Mehmed Pasha Kukavica, who served twice as a vizier in Istanbul. His han in Foča was built just before 1758. It had been named the Great Han, and it represents a typical example of han without the courtyard, with rectangular base and simple layout. On the ground floor, there was a large stable for the horses, and both to the left and the right of the entrance, a warehouse for goods. Beside the main entrance and the stables, there was a single staircase leading to the central hall of the first floor, around which the rooms were arranged. The washroom, abdesthana, and the lavatories were situated on the narrow side of the hall. The central hall had no ceiling, a common feature of almost all hans of this type, but an open roof structure instead. The ground floor of Kukavica Han was built with stone, with the first floor built in stone and ground floor built in stone and the first floor half timber construction. Another part of han building in Bosnia Pashadom, as previously mentioned, is the one which has developed around central rectangular courtyard. This type of han is introduced in the territory of the Bosnian Pashadom from the center of the Ottoman Empire, simultaneously with the establishment of the Oriental type of town, a new architectural type previously unknown in this area except in monastic architecture. 3 hans out of the total of 4 commercial hans with courtyard built in Sarajevo during the 15th and 16th century were situated in the main shopping street, which is called Čaršija. The oldest han known to be built in Bosnian Pashadom is Kolobara Han, part of the Vakuf of Gazi Isabek Isaković, the founder of Sarajevo, built in 1462 and placed in the central part of Čaršija. This han has been destroyed in the past, and unfortunately there is no information about its appearance. Another han with courtyard is Tashli Han, endowment of Gazi Husrev Bek, built in mid-16th century. It marked the eastern border of the 16th century Čaršija in Sarajevo. Morića Han was instead the largest building on the northern border of the Čaršija. Tashli Han was the most monumental of all the hans in Bosnia. It had a rectangular base and layout typical of all the Caravanserais built as the 2-story buildings. It was completely built with stone. Unlike all the other hans, whose central courtyard was used for loading and unloading of goods, Tashli Han's courtyard had a row of shops on the ground level, which characterized it as a commercial han. Shops in the southern area were created in the later phases of its construction. A shedervan with several fountains was built in the center of the courtyard with masjid on pillars above it. From the courtyard close to the main han entrance, there were 2 stone staircases leading to the rooms and hallways on the top floor. Sleeping quarters were vaulted with small domes and hallways with barrel vaults. Lead was used as a cover. This han provided lodging for travelers and merchants, and it served also as a bazaar. Tašli Han has its own waterworks and water well. Near the end of the construction of Tašli Han, craftsmen skilled in constructing domes and walls were called from Dubrovnik, the republic on the shore of the Adriatic Sea, which used to pay tributes to the Ottoman Empire. The invitation was sent between 1542 and 1543 by merchants and citizens of Sarajevo, and it was addressed to the Count of Dubrovnik and its noblemen. The letter states that all the inhabitants of Sarajevo, together with the merchants from Dubrovnik currently residing in Sarajevo, need fireproof building because frequent fires are causing a lot of damage. They are requesting to dispatch 30 stonemasons proficient in building walls, vaults, and domes. Stonemasons would have to work on a completion of a specific caravanserai. The stonemasons would receive a compensation for their work, the reimbursement of their travel expenses, and presents. Furthermore, all inhabitants of Sarajevo would welcome them. The building would need to be completed by the end of the year. There were two more Hans built using completely stone material, voluted with domes and covered with lead, one in Banja Luka and another one in Foča. Unfortunately, we don't have any visual material about these other commercial caravanserais because they were destroyed much before any visual material could be made, like photographs or designs. The Han in Banja Luka, we have only testimonies from the travelers. The Han in Banja Luka was among the most important traffic centers in Bosnia. The city has been the capital of Bosnian Sanjak since 1553 and of the whole Bosnian Pashadom from 1580 to 1639. The caravanserai with courtyard in Banja Luka was part of the Ferhat Pasha Sokolović Vakuf, the first Bosnian Begler Bey, that consisted of 260 public buildings. It was located in an urban complex with a mosque, mekteb, turbe, shedrvan, a hammam, sahat kula, and shops. The caravanserai was built just before 1587. It was situated facing the main entrance of Ferhadia Mosque courtyard. The hammam, built by the same Vakif, was standing next to it. Looking at the site on which it stood, one can conclude that this caravanserai was a large building. The endowment document shows that it was solidly built, and it states that it should be covered with lead. Its founding provided from savings and income of the Vakuf. The time of the building demolition is not known. Its site today is called Han. In 1573, the French traveler Philippe Canet writes about Foča in Herzegovina and its caravanserai. He describes the caravanserai as ill-smelling and in poor conditions, since, for instance, the rain kept falling on his neck the whole night. However, soon after, a good Han was built in Foča, and the French traveler Lefebvre in 1611 writes in his journal that the Han in Foča looked like a market and that it could accommodate 300 horses. According to his accounts, this new Han was built of solid stone and covered with lead roof. Again, the traveler Philippe Canet states that in 1573 there was a caravanserai in Pljevlja, in Herzegovina. It was covered with lead, spacious but dark. In 1611, Lefebvre writes, among other things, that Pljevlja had 2 lead-covered caravanserais. Kanye also mentions that the village of Čajniče, located in Herzegovina along the Dubrovnik road, had many beautiful mosques and caravanserais covered with lead. Evlija Čelebi mentions one in Čajniče and says that it was covered with lead, just like nearby the Bezistan. Morića Han in Sarajevo is the only large commercial Han of this area surviving until present day, almost in its original form. It was partly built in stone, as part of the Gazi Husrev Beg's Vakuf in late 16th and early 17th century. It housed 300 beds, and for a number of years it was the center of the political and social life of craftsmen, merchants, and scholars. Morica Han is the only completely preserved Han in Bosnia, which belongs to the type of the old Hans of the Ottoman architecture. It is located in the formerly busiest part of Sarajevo. Although it is quite large when compared with the surrounding buildings and shops, it fits perfectly into the town structure, and it creates, together with its surroundings, a harmonious agglomeration. It consists of a ground floor as a first floor and the first floor on the top with a rectangular ground plan. The top floor was made by wood, while the ground floor was built of stone, partly to hold the weight of the top floor and partly as a protection against fire for the goods stored there. The central courtyard, as all other courtyards of this type of Hans, is mostly placed under the top floor, supported by a colonnade of oak columns, forming a porch. This architectural solution could use the available space up to its limits. All of the four sides of the courtyard were full of shops, storages, and horse stables that were always located facing the main entrance. The top floor was used for living, with completely independent layout, with respect to the layout of the ground floor. Living quarters were located on both sides of a wide hallway, and rooms had visible ceiling construction. Two staircases, located far from one another, were leading from the ground to the top floor. Next to the staircase, there was one abdesthana for washing hands and a bathroom and toilets further on. Morica Han, like other three large Hans in Sarajevo, had its separate waterworks and a fountain with a well next to it. In addition to the main entrance, it also had another side entrance. Kolobara Han, that was built just before February 1462 and not preserved, had three entrances. Hans served primarily for lodging and trade, but when coffee started to be consumed, already in the second half of the 16th century, Hans were the places where coffee was served. The first coffee house in Sarajevo was in Morica Han, opened in 1592 on the top floor, facing the entrance. Merchants from the whole Charshia would meet there, together with traveling merchants, to exchange news and adventures from their travels. This was the oldest coffee shop in Sarajevo, and it is a part of its history, its political and social life. Almost all commercial Hans with central courtyards were built during the 16th century, with the exception of Kolobara Han in Sarajevo that was built in mid-15th century, and Maškovića Han built in mid-17th century. Yusuf Mašković Han is the westernmost structure of the Islamic architecture on the territory of the Ottoman Empire, situated in a small settlement of Vrana, in a fertile valley on the north side of the Vrana lake. Yusuf Mašković was born, so just let me explain the situation. This is Han. These are the remains of the medieval fortress and Templar monastery. And this is the lake Vrana. And this is the Adriatic Sea. Just a small patch of earth is dividing lake from the sea. So it's almost completely at the coast. I think it's 4 kilometers from the coast of the Adriatic Sea. Yusuf Mašković was born in nearby coastal settlement in a poor family, but he managed to rise above his station and to become an influential figure in the Ottoman Empire. As a prominent soldier, he attained a high position at the Ottoman court, where he became vizier and Kapudan Pasha, or admiral, of the Ottoman Navy during the conquest of Crete. He started the construction of the Han in his native land in 1644, but he died very soon in 1646, so the construction of the Han was never completed. The 7 meters high walls of the Han enclose a rectangular area or over 3,000 square meters. As a novelty, compared to previous examples in Bosnian Pashadom, this Han has its interior divided in 2 parts or 2 connected courtyards, with buildings attached to its perimeter walls. So this is entrance, this is the first bigger courtyard, and this is the second courtyard. Here's the entrance to the second courtyard. A bigger courtyard was designed for the accommodation of travelers, while the somewhat smaller courtyard with its attached buildings was probably intended for the accommodation of wealthier travelers or the owner, Mashković himself. The main and only entrance to the Han is through a fortified door located on the ground floor of the tower building that was extensively reconstructed during the later periods. Until last year, this was the state of the Han, and this is also from the same period. And last year was done very big project, and the whole Han was completely reconstructed and put in function. In the access of the main entrance, there is an open rectangular pavilion, open up by pointed arches, underneath which a water fountain used to be located, and above which a masjid could have been placed. In the same axis, behind the pavilion, there is an entrance to a second courtyard. A series of rooms, lodgings, are located along the southern wall of the smaller courtyard, each of which have its own fireplace and two wall cabinets. According to the architectural remains on the walls, the lodgings were supposed to be vaulted with domes. Opposite the lodgings, there are the remains of the stables and a hammam that makes Mashković Han the only known example of Han, which comprises the hammam with its walls in Bosnian Pashadom. So this is the central pavilion, and beneath it is the entrance in the smaller courtyard. Here you can see the pavilion and also the view from the pavilion to the exit of the Han, and this is the building that fortifies or above the entrance. This building next to it was very heavily reconstructed during time because Han was always used even after Ottomans went, so we cannot say what was the original state of the buildings here. So, Mashković Han is located on a slope 50 meters south of the medieval ruin of Vrana Fort. Its location was probably chosen based on the availability of water that was flowing freely from the nearby source to the northern corner of Han. From this point, it was then distributed to the hammam and to other buildings with a system of stone canals. So let me just let you back. So this is the when the project of reconstruction was finished, and you can see here that this is the building of hammam, and it's not finished. It doesn't have any roof because they are waiting maybe help of Turkey to help to reconstruct it the way it was and it should be, because we don't have enough experts to know how it should look like. And this building, they're not sure what is it for and what was the function. You will maybe later see, or maybe, I don't know if I included that dia, but here in one of the graphics of the 17th century, one can see a dome building. So they're thinking that maybe this was the praying place or a mosque inside of the Han. So the whole complex was built with large, finely carved stone blocks, which adhere to each other almost without any mortar in between. This building technique is of a very high quality, even compared to the standards of the coastal Dalmatian towns, where the work of stonemasons achieved a high level of quality through centuries of practice. We do not know how exactly Hans with a central courtyard built in stone looked like in 15th and 16th century in Bosnian Pashadom. However, from the example of the Mashković Han, one can assume that project for the construction of the Han was brought to Vrana from Istanbul, where the local governor, Durak Bek, was summoned by Yusuf Mashković before the beginning of the construction. This is the building in a smaller courtyard that it can be deducted from its walls, that it was constructed in a later period, but also in Ottoman period, because We have the remains, we have pointed arches on its windows, and also from the back side toward the outside it has windows. And the stones from these additional 2 windows were found nearby, so they were able to reconstruct them and put them beside them here. We do not know either if the measures against the plague, which occupied a lot of Venetian regulations in an international trade, had any impact on Ottoman Hans and Caravanserais. Nevertheless, we do actually know that this Ottoman commercial type of building, namely Hans and Caravanserais, was successfully exported beyond the frontiers of the empire into the Venetian territory. The Levantine merchant, Daniel Rodriga, who spent years living and trading in Bosnia, began the construction of a reloading station, or so-called scala, on the seashore in the town of Split in Dalmatia, that would eventually assume the form of Ottoman Han and its completion. According to Rodriga's design, this reload station had to be a part of the new overland trading route connecting Rumelia with Venice, going through Sarajevo and Split. This new land trade route would attract merchants by accelerating their voyage, and it would facilitate the shipment of their goods to Venice, shortening their voyage by sea and thus making it safer. All this was done in full cooperation with Ottoman governors, who from their part built bridges, formed roads, and constructed caravanserais. This reload station opened in 1592. And you can see it in its complete form here in front of the Diocletian Palace, remains of the Diocletian Palace, and center of the town of Split. It contained a custom house, lodging quarters for merchants, a stable from their horses, a warehouse for their goods, and a house for the guardian. This whole complex, organized around a rectangular courtyard with an independent source of water, was surrounded by high walls, ensuring the safety of merchants. The scala was soon called Lazaretto because it started to be used also for the quarantine of merchants and to sanitize imported goods. This is it at the end, in 17th century. This is the form. But the first complex that was built and that Jewish merchant built in beginning was this complex, so building around the courtyard, central courtyard. It has this irregular form because of the terrain it was built on. The scala was soon called Lazaretto because it started to be used also for the quarantine of merchants and to sanitize important goods. One can presume that Daniel Rodriga, traveling through Ottoman territories and making frequent use of Ottoman Hans, recognized their functionality and recreated it on the shore of the Adriatic Sea for the same purpose. Soon, the state became the official owner of the Lazaretto and decided to enlarge it with the addition of another courtyard. This is the new courtyard that the Venice Republic constructed it soon after, because this one proved not to be big enough for all the trade that was coming and all the merchants that were coming to Split. This new courtyard, whose construction was financed by the Venetian Republic and designed by state engineers, maintained the original plan scheme of the first courtyard. You can see more or less they're the same with the buildings surrounding the central courtyard. Maintained the original plan scheme of the first courtyard planned by Rodriga. The rectangular void in the middle was surrounded on all sides by buildings with storages or stables on the lower level and residences with openings only toward the inner courtyard on the upper level, thus repeating the form of the Ottoman Han. Even though they were similar in form and built around the same period, the basic functions of the Lazaretto was in contrast with the vibrant space of Ottoman commercial Hans, which constantly hosted the exchange of people and goods. As we have already mentioned, Hans situated in Chashia were essential to enable trade and thus contributing to the prosperity of the town and the surrounding area. In fact, in the province where trade and craftsmanship were boosting the local economy, Hans were indispensable. They played also a significant social role in the everyday life of local people. The courtyards of the Hans were places characterized by a constant flow of people. Their doors were always open, not only for the wandering and tired travelers, but also for the merchants renting the shops on the Hans ground floor, and for the merchants and travelers who were selling and buying goods. Starting from the end of 16th century, a great number of Hans were adapted to accommodate coffee houses. Consequently, local people gathered in Hans to drink coffee, socialize, and exchange the news. Many Hans in Bosnia and Pashadom continued to maintain their function even until the 20th century, and some of the few preserved ones even nowadays. The accounts from travelogue written by the Armenian pilgrim Simon of Poland at the beginning of the 17th century on his way from Istanbul to Venice indicates, on the contrary, that the general mood in the Lazaretto in Split was very different from the Ottoman Hans in Bosnia. His dramatic testimony shows us how much the conduct toward the foreign travelers on the territory of the Venetian Republic shocked and affected those arriving from the Ottoman Empire. Simon narrates, "When we crossed to the other side of the river and entered the fortress of Split, soldiers came to meet us. We were overjoyed and thought that they had come to honor us. But they took us to a house, which is called Nazareth, shut the door on us, and left. Not knowing their language or the circumstances surrounding the event, we remained there in depressing sorrow and cried whole day. In the evening, we saw many merchants, Christians and Muslims from various cities, Istanbul, Angora, Edirne, New Ulfa, and other gavars. Conversing with them, we asked why they have detained us. They replied that such was their custom. Even if the Sultan of Turkey came, they would have to isolate him in quarantine." Hearing this, we became so distressed, and such an irreparable melancholy took over us that our entire being was disturbed and our tongues dried out. Seeing all these difficult calamities which had descended upon our heads, I, with a deep sigh, composed a following lament. "O Lord, save us from here. From this quarantine in a foreign land. We fell into this carelessly. A heavy calamity has befallen us. This quarantine is a prison, a trap for innocent people, without a wit or God's command, but through a law created by fools. This quarantine, like an envious beast, has no bread or water. There is only a dumb guardian. There are large mosquitoes and fleas. This quarantine resembles hate. It melts the bones of mankind. O Lord, save us from here, so that we can depart from its gates. We miss the faces of people and various tasty dishes. If we call someone, they flee from us in disgust. We are filled with great mourning and sorrow. Save us, O Lord, from this ordeal. These pitiless people have kept us for 40 days. Woe to him who finds himself here. He who did not bring an abundance of money, he will soon realize the state he is in. It is neither death or life. Lord, show us the way. Lead us out through the gates so that we can go and see the land of the Franks, the tombs of Peter and Paul." Thank you for your attention.